the perfect lunch combo. That first bite of your favorite sub, followed by ice-cold Pepsi. Add a couple of friends, and now that's next level. Suddenly, the laughs get louder, the stories keep flowing, and the food tastes better. Because Pepsi brings out more flavor, more fun, and more of the moment. Food deserves Pepsi. Grab a Pepsi Zero Sugar today.
Suffering from dry, tired, irritated eyes? Don't let dry eyes win. Use Systane Pro. It hydrates, restores, and protects dry eyes for up to 12 hours. Systane Pro. Triple action dry eye relief.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. Democrats appear to have flipped a state legislative district in western Pennsylvania that Donald Trump won less than 2 years ago by 18 points. This has big implications for the midterms, and for hidden reasons, it's really a reason for optimism. It's no accident that this comes as Trump has hit yet another series of new lows in polling, and we have a bunch of new data that strongly suggests things are starting to trend in the Democrats' direction in a new way. We're going to work through all of it with Michael Cohen, who has a good piece on his Substack, Truth and Consequences, arguing that the big story of this moment is GOP extremism. Michael, good to have you on.
Great to be here, Greg. Thanks for having me.
So in this Pennsylvania state legislative district north of Pittsburgh in Butler County, Democrat Brandon Dukes is slightly ahead of Republican Scott Timko. This district backed Trump by 18 in 2024. It's voted reliably Republican for decades. Note of caution here, the AP has not yet called the race, but either way, the fact that this district moved by this much is a big story for Democrats. Michael, your thoughts on that?
You know, it's actually a continuation of a good story for Democrats, which is that the vast majority of special elections since Trump was elected in took office in 2025, Democrats have dominated, and often by double digits. This is yet one more place where Democrats are overperforming. And look, the reality is that this kind of overperformance in special elections is usually a pretty good indication of where things are headed in the midterm elections. You saw this in 2018, Democrats doing very well in special elections and then winning House majority in November. I mean, that's kind of where these things are leading. However, I got to say that the level of overperformance is actually greater than we've seen before. I mean, again, you mentioned 19 points yesterday in Pennsylvania. This keeps happening, and it should tell us something about where the electorate is right now.
Absolutely. And there's actually an example from 2018 that applies very well. Recall that before the 2018 midterms, Democrat Connor Lamb won a House special election in a Pennsylvania district in southwestern Pennsylvania. Trump had carried that district 2 years earlier in 2016 by like 20 points. And so this was a big shift, and it was a harbinger of the midterm blowout in 2018 that was to come. Now, I think for a bunch of reasons, this midterm probably won't match the huge pickup Dems made in House seats in 2018. But still, I think we should note that at least 3 very competitive House races are in Pennsylvania. And I see this as good news. Again, even though it hasn't been called, the shift itself is good news in a state that's going to really help decide control of the House, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You make a great observation that Democrats are unlikely to do as well as in 2018 just because there are fewer seats that are competitive. But when you look at the raw numbers, you look at where they are in the generic ballot, I actually think they might be in better position just with fewer seats that are able for them to win. However, if the trend lines continue where they're going, and Trump's approval rating remains where it is, which is in the mid 30s at this point, you could see a situation which the bottom just falls out for Republicans, and you see a huge shift toward Democrats, which means that a lot of places we haven't thought are competitive could be competitive.
I will point out that the 50+1 site has the generic House ballot matchup right now at Democrats +6. That's still not quite where we need it to be for Democrats to win the Senate, but it seems to be moving right now. It seems like Democrats are gaining in this generic House ballot matchup. And I think it's worth focusing on this too. The electorate in midterms is different from the electorate in presidential years. A new YouGov poll really gets at that. It has Dems up by 7 points in the generic House ballot matchup, which is perfectly consistent with the averages showing it at 6 that we just mentioned. But the YouGov poll has Democrats leading by 23 points among those who are extremely enthusiastic about voting. And as you know, being a veteran of following politics, Michael, midterm election electorates tend to be highly educated, engaged voters. And so there are lots and lots of signs that Republicans could kind of sit out this election, especially without Trump on the ballot. Can you talk about that dynamic?
I think that's the biggest issue we should be looking at between now and Election Day is these voters, Republican voters who are not happy with Trump, but who are, as of now, still voting Republican. There's this group, I guess, called double haters, in which they don't like the Democratic Party, but they're not happy with the party with Trump. And if those voters shift against the GOP, that's when you see a real bloodbath. I just want to, but I mean, I think it's important to point this out that it's still very hard for Democrats to do this. We're still talking about a place like take Alaska, right? Trump's won all 3 of his elections there by double digits. Now you're looking at a situation in which Democrats could potentially win a Senate seat. Right now, they look like they're pretty well positioned to do that. That's a pretty crazy outcome. In Texas, Democrats have generally done, okay, and I mean, okay, at least in a red state. They haven't lost by as big a margin as they've lost elsewhere. So you could see that begin to shift. But it's really hard for any party to, in so many places where they have done poorly, to all of a sudden overperform. And that's what Democrats need to do. But again, the trend lines seem to be moving in that direction.
You brought up the Alaska Senate race, so I will point out that the nonpartisan primary that was just held in Alaska, the Democrat Mary Peltola got 48% of the vote. The leading Republican Dan Sullivan got 42% of the vote. And so, God, that is a reason for optimism right there. I mean, she's beating the Republican right at this moment. Now, I don't want to get too optimistic, but if you're looking at, Alaska really being in play, and now it looks like it's really within reach for Democrats, you can start to see a path to the majority. And so, I agree with you that Michigan heavily complicates the picture, however, but that is a real cause for optimism, Peltola being up.
It's not just Peltola being up; it's also Sullivan being, in the low 40s, incumbent running for re-election. That's usually a pretty bright red light that suggests you're in serious trouble to win re-election. The thing with Peltola is that she's won statewide before, right? She did this in 2018, I believe. She won the statewide, and she won again in 20, and then she lost in 22 in a bad environment for Democrats. So I just think that she is, she has a track record in Alaska. Sullivan appears to be an unpopular incumbent. The national environment is just terrible for Republicans. So yeah, and she's leading every poll. So it does seem like she's got a chance. But again, I got to what I said a second ago. You have to remember, though, these are red states. These are red states. And for Democrats, I mean, you can see a scenario Democrats win 2 or 3 Senate seats in red states. That is right. I think we have to step back here and think, just realize for a second how unusual a situation we're in right now, where you have this many Republican seats, places where Trump, again, won by double digits in many cases, are competitive. This is just very unusual in our modern political environment. Keep in mind right now, for example, there's not a single Democratic senator in a state that Trump won 3 straight elections, right? There's one Republican senator in a state that Kamala Harris won in 2024, and that would be Maine, and that's Susan Collins, and she looks like she might lose. So, for Democrats to be competitive in Iowa, in Ohio, in Alaska, in Texas, states that, again, went for Trump all 3 times, is really unusual. And I think speaks to just how deeply unpopular he is as president and how much his unpopularity has hurt the Republican brand.
If you're enjoying this episode and want to get even more out of the DSR Network, you need to check out our Substack. The DSR Network Substack is the absolute best way to follow Deep State Radio, the DSR Daily, Words Matter, Need to Know, Still a Consciousness, AI, Energy and Climate, and the Daily Blast. Sign up to get notified every time a new episode drops and stay up to date on the latest news and expert analysis. Right now, we're offering 20% off of a DSR Network membership. Paid members get an ad-free listening experience, select episodes 2 days early, 50% off of David's Need to Know Substack, and more. To get your 20% off, go to dsrnetwork.substack.com/August26. That's dsrnetwork.substack.com/August26.
Reese Witherspoon here, checking into my favorite hotel in Paris. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
I'm traveling with my Wells Fargo Autograph Journey card, so I earn rewards wherever I book travel. 5 times points with hotels, 4 times with airlines, 3 times on restaurants and other travel, and 1 point on other purchases. Phew, that was a lot. I need to lie down. Is the room ready?
Visit wellsfargo.com/autograph journey. Terms apply.
I wrote a little song to remind you, Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Bring a date, your squad, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Well, that brings us to Trump's numbers. We had a new Reuters poll this week that has Trump's approval rating down to a dismal 33%, 64% disapprove. Now, it's possible that Donald Trump's approval isn't down at 33%. It isn't quite that low, possibly. But note this, Trump has just hit his lowest point ever in the New York Times average of polls, which has him at 37% approving with 59% disapproving. The Times average is kind of conservative. It has a lot of data in it. For him to be 22 points underwater by those averages suggests maybe that the 33% that Reuters has might not be far from where he really is now. What do you think?
I mean, if it's hard with polling these days because you have a lot of lousy polling out there. I mean, if you look at sort of the Times breaks it down to their select pollsters and their other pollsters, and among the select pollsters, he's doing rather poorly. What I think is most interesting about his numbers is it's not just that he is unpopular, it's that he's really unpopular. You look at like his strong disapproval, it's generally flirting around 50%. With the somewhat disapproval, like in the single digits, and people who don't like Trump really don't like Trump, and that I think is a little bit unusual. I mean, look, George Bush in his end of his second term was this unpopular. He was actually more unpopular. He was in the 20s, right? But this is that was not before a midterm election. It was before a presidential election in 2008, in which Democrats did exceptionally well. So I do think that the Trump factor here is what is driving all of this.
But one other thing, I want to pick up on what you said about the strong disapproval of Trump, because I think people miss the importance of this. It's not that unusual to see a poll in which 50% of the country strongly disapproves of Donald Trump. That is unbelievable. And again, if you think about that in the context of the midterm electorate, then it becomes even more meaningful. Midterm electorates tend to favor the out party. They're made up of more engaged voters. The voters who come out in a presidential race, maybe for a Donald Trump, don't come out as much. And so the strong disapproval drives the turnout for the out party in a big way. I think those two things together, they really have synergy and could mean a lot.
You raised a really interesting point here. I think that not people comment on, which is that when Trump's not on the ballot, Republican candidates tend to underperform. So it's not just that he's unpopular. It's that without him on the ballot, all those Trump voters who turn out for him are not going to turn out. I mean, traditionally, they haven't turned out. And so if that happens again, it makes the Republican challenge that much greater.
Maybe this is how we should think about it. To the people who approve of Trump, at least, whoever's left that still approves of him, Trump's not on the ballot, right? But to the people who disapprove of Trump, Trump is on the ballot.
Right. That's
right. They're going right. Yeah. They're going out to vote against Donald Trump. He is on the ballot. They see this election as an opportunity to register their profound disapproval of the president and their profound disapproval with the direction of the country, and B, put a check on Donald Trump. So you put all that together and it starts to look like even more of a perfect storm, I think.
I agree. I think it's exactly right. I mean, I thought I would have said to you a year ago that I thought this would be a bad midterm. Because look, midterms are always bad for the party in power. Historically, they always lose seats. And, you could say it would be worse for Republicans because Trump's not on the ballot. You don't have those occasional Trump voters. So this was always going to be a rough cycle for Republicans. I think what's made it potentially an historically bad cycle is just how unpopular Trump has become. And frankly, that Republicans keep shooting themselves in the foot with some of these really lousy nominees.
Yeah, and just allowing the point you raised earlier, which is that things could start shifting the other way if Republican voters come home. That's all very possible. There's still a long way to go here. Anything can happen. But there are a lot of things falling into place right now. CNN's Harry Enton caught something really interesting, which is that Trump is absolutely bleeding Hispanic men. Enton pointed out that Trump won that demographic, Hispanic men, by 10 points in 2024. But now in CNN polling, his net approval among them is minus 41 points. And so I think this is significant because it's like another way in which the Trump coalition is falling apart. Hispanic men were the big success story for the GOP in 2024. Reams and reams of punditry were produced that said that this shows that there was a major realignment underway. It's all gone now. Hispanic men, according to Enton, favor the Democrats by 20 points, and Enton thinks this will have a quote-unquote massive impact on the midterms. In fact, he called the numbers bonkers, and they are bonkers. I mean, that's just crazy stuff.
No, they are. And if you look at, you could go back to last year, the off-year elections in New Jersey and Virginia. Some of the biggest overperformance by Democrats was in Hispanic districts, Hispanic areas, right? The drop-off in Hispanic support for Trump has been extraordinary. And to your point, you said this Trump coalition, it was a coalition of convenience, right? It was the 2024 coalition that Trump won with people who were upset with Biden, upset with Harris, upset with the state of the country. But those Hispanic voters have just, I think more than any other demographic group, have abandoned the Republican Party. And frankly, one of the reasons I think why Texas is actually why I think Republicans has a good chance of winning is because the drop-off in support among Hispanics in Texas has been extraordinary. And that they're a huge part of the electorate there. And that alone could be enough for Tallarico to win. So I agree with you. I think that is an underappreciated part of this, that Hispanic voters are localized in a few states, Florida, California, Texas. But in the places where they are, where they vote in big numbers, they can make a big difference. And I think Texas is the most interesting place to see how much that bleeding of Hispanic support really hurts the Republican Party.
Yes, and I think we should point out here as well that the successes that Republicans had in some of those South Texas counties that are very Hispanic heavy were kind of seen as the locus of this realignment for Trump and Republicans. And so for now, those Texas Hispanics to be shifting back towards Democrats once again shows how absurd it was to read Trump's 1.5 point victory in 2024 as a major realignment moment, right?
Don't get me started on this topic. It makes me crazy. All of the punditry about 2024, I think, just kind of missed the mark to a large extent. This was a 1.5, as you said, point victory, one of the lowest margins of victory in a presidential election in recent memory. And it was one that was really a backlash to the party in power. And look, we've been going through this cycle every 2 years. Right, 2016, you could say it was a backlash to Democrats. 2018, a backlash to Trump. 2020, a backlash against Trump again. 22, backlash against Biden. 24, backlash against Biden. 26, a backlash against Trump. This is how these cycles go. We were living in a period of extreme anti-incumbency, of anti-system politics. And, it was not reasonable to believe that Trump would be able to hold this coalition, also because he's, he doesn't seem to care about politics. He cares about going after his political enemies, and he cares about his little pet projects. He is not a politician who seems interested at all in growing the Republican Party, in helping it prosper. I don't even think he cares. I really don't think he cares at all. And, that is a problem for the party. And he has pushed them, the Republicans in the House and the Senate, to follow through on an agenda that is unpopular. And he has overreached. Right, he acted as though he had this huge mandate, and that led him to pursue this policy on immigration enforcement that has created enormous backlash, not just among Hispanics, but among a whole host of Americans. He went forward with the tariffs, thinking this had broad support. Guess what? That's creating a huge backlash. And in a place like Iowa, could actually cost Republicans the governorship, the Senate, and a couple of House seats. So I do think that, we really do need to go back and look at 2024 and recognize that this was a response, a backlash to Trump, to Harris and to Biden, but it was not creating a new coalition, not by any means.
So just to review all this very quickly, there's been a huge shift in a Pennsylvania state legislative district towards Dems. Mary Peltola is looking very good in Alaska. Hispanics are abandoning Trump in enormous numbers. Trump's approval is down at 33% in a new poll and down at 37% in the New York Times averages. And Democrats are +6 or +7 in the generic ballot and are winning by double digits among very, very engaged voters. Those pieces all together, they paint a pretty good picture, I think, Michael.
They do. I mean, look, and again, we have 2 months to go until the election, and it's easy for Democrats to get really excited about where things are going. But I think, as it did, the trend lines point in one direction, and that is for Democrats to do well. I mean, at this point, I think the chance Democrats take the House would be stunning if they did not end up taking the House. And the Senate, again, that it's in play is really, it says something a lot about where the direction of American politics has gone. But I think Democrats need to understand something, that if they do well in midterms, it is not because they have convinced Americans they have the best plan for fixing the economy, or they have the best plan for healthcare, or they're better in immigration. They will have won because they're not the Donald Trump and the Republican Party. That is the source of their success over the past year or so, and will, I believe, be likely the source of their success in November. But I think we have to be very clear as to what's happening here. This is an anti-incumbent wave, okay? It's not a pro-democratic wave.
Well, you know how politics is, man. The second things go your way, you think that it's a realignment, just like they did.
Right, exactly. That's exactly it. And I think both parties get into huge danger when they over-analyze or over-determine what happens in an election. Right. I mean, a lot of what happens in November is going to have nothing to do with the campaigns Democrats won. Right. Some of it will, but have a lot more to do with the fact that Republicans are unpopular. That's the biggest thing. And I think Democrats need to understand that. And they need to have a plan for that. They need to plan for that when they go into 2028 to understand that, they haven't made the case to Americans. Although, having said that, because how unpopular Trump is, this whole cycle feels like 2006, 2008 to me. 2006, Democrats had a huge victory in the second midterm for W. Then you go into 2008, you have the Great Recession, you have the war. People are upset about that. Democrats even get an even bigger victory in 2008. I think that's kind of where things are going. But as you remember, in 2010, what happened to Democrats? They got their butts kicked. So be careful. That's what I'd say.
All extremely well said, folks. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to check out Michael Cohen's Substack, Truth and Consequences. Michael, awesome to talk to you. Thanks for coming on.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Griff.
Hey there, I'm Travis Hoyam, one of the hosts of Motley Fool Hidden Gems Investing. Each weekday on Motley Fool Hidden Gems Investing, we talk through the business news you need to know and the stories moving stocks on Wall Street. On weekends, we game plan personal finance strategies and dive into the industries shaping tomorrow and host the experts, authors, and executives that understand them. Tune in for insights and a long-term perspective on investing and, of course, stock ideas, plenty of them. To quote a listener, it pays to listen. Check us out and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.